What's up, guys, and welcome back for another Diablo 3 tips and tricks guide. This one we're going to be going over gearing, really. So it's like getting good gear is really important in Diablo 3, but knowing what good gear is can go a long way. So in this video, I'm going to kind of list some things to keep in mind while you're gearing a character, and this is for like non-season, season, any of that thing. It applies throughout the game, like in just a general sense, right? All right, so just kind of start things off, like sheet DPS, right? Doesn't really tell you everything you need to know, right? Like when you compare items, this plus or minus damage, toughness, percentage doesn't always mean that it's going to be an upgrade, right? A lot of builds are using, different modifiers and multipliers and stuff like that to actually do the damage and to scale the damage. So when you're first leveling, sure, you can use the stat changes and stuff like that, the percentages, to kind of like constitute what is going to put you raw DPS. When you start really putting in putting together a really good in-game build, you got to look at other factors, right? All right, so first up, let's talk about Ancients, right? Ancients, they do the same thing as like a normal variant, right? The only thing that's different is the stats are going to roll with a higher, and not like all stats, right? So your base stats like dexterity, strength, vitality, things like that. The other stats that roll on Ancients, like cooldown reduction and all that other stuff, those are going to be the same, roll range as a normal item. The other thing about Ancients is you can augment them to add more stats to them, more dexterity if you're a demon hunter, or strength or whatever. So usually in the gearing process, once you start actually, trying to make all your items ancient, that's why, because you're going to be adding even more stats on top of everything. All right, now we're going to talk about, unique stats on certain items. So just like Yang's recurve here, it has a reduced resource cost by 47, or it's up to like 50%, right? And that's something that you can't get if you put it in the cube. So there are certain items that have a legendary power that's good for the build, but the reason that these builds are wearing it on their character is because they're going to have other abilities like Yang's. So for instance, if we actually cubed Yang's recurve, we would only get the multi-shot legendary power, but like we would lose that 47% resource cost reduction. So that's why we have to wear it on this build, and that you have to kind of like keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. Or if you're looking at a build and you're trying to wonder why they're wearing certain things when they can cube it, chances are it's because of a unique modifier on that item. As far as the gearing process goes, and this could be for like season, non-season, if you start a new character, if you're putting together a build, you should be just trying to get all the right items, get all your set pieces. Don't worry about their ancient, don't worry about the right rolls, first, because most builds are going to be requiring like your 2, 4, and 6 set piece bonus or legendary powers and stuff like that. Get the build actually up and running. Once you actually get all the right items, then you can start going for ancient, start hunting for primal versions, start actually getting, the right rolls for the build on each one of the pieces. Like for instance, when I started building this character here, right, I just went ahead and got, all the UE pieces that I needed. I got my Yangs, I got my Deadmans, my, rings and stuff. Once all that stuff was done, the build was functioning at a low level, I started going after like Ancients, and getting to make sure I get the right rolls on every piece, right? And then once you get to that point, you start augmenting and everything like that. Then you can really start running really high GRs, high difficulty, start hunting for the primals, and then start replacing your ancients with primals. Now, primals are the same. They're just ancients, right? But they max roll all their stats, and so they can be augmented as well. So like this, it's always going to roll the maximum amount for each stat that's on the gear. And that's why people like to go after like full primal, right? They don't have to worry about having like a really low like cooldown on something. If it's a primal, it's just going to be maxed out at like 10, right? So keep that in mind. There's definitely a gauge at which you have to go. You start off getting the right pieces of gear, then ancient to augment, and then you can start hunting those primals. And sometimes if you find a primal and for a slot, you don't even get an ancient first, cool. If you want to save your augments for when you get primals, you might not be augmenting for a while, but it's usually good to dump good resources into good ancients and then start, augmenting them. And then if you do get a primal, it's just like kind of a bonus, All right, now Kanai's cube is probably one of the most important features for like in-game, gearing and stuff like that. If you're really pushing high end and you're trying to get to the top of the leaderboard, you're gonna be pretty much using every one of these these recipes on here, and just kind of gonna briefly go through these and kind of how they affect gearing. Extracting legendary power, obviously that's how you're going to get your legendary powers, right, in here. And then you're like reforged legendary. This is expensive. This requires you to do a lot of bounties, but this allows you to actually re-roll items, and maybe you can pop an ancient, maybe you can pop a primal, and also trying to like get the right stats on it. Reforged legendary will kind of help you get, you know, those problem pieces, because it's always like when you put together a build, there's always like one item that just won't drop or won't drop right. I notice it a lot in like Crusader builds, like Crusader shields and stuff like that are really difficult to get right. So, you know, using those bounty mats to actually re-roll gives you a little bit more, you know, flexibility. And then obviously upgrade rare item. Upgrade rare item can actually be useful if you're trying to put the initial build together. If you're just trying to get those basic pieces, you probably won't be using this in the very, very late in game, but early on, good recipe to use. And then convert set item is good as well for when you're starting off, when you're just trying to complete the set bonus. But the resulting item from convert set will not be ancient. So don't go into it thinking you're going to get like ancient items. Go into it thinking, I just need to complete the set and get my bonuses, right? And then next up would be your remove level requirement. Probably not for late game grinding. It's good if you want to, like, you know, if you're working towards like, you know, getting an alt leveled or geared. You take like really good items, like a really good weapon, stuff like that, you know, remove the level requirement, throw it on level 1, and they can kind of like self power level a little bit. And then there's other things like convert gems. Converting gems will help you when you're putting on augments. And if you have a lot of, like, you know, if you're running Demon Hunter and you need emeralds, but you have a lot of the other ones, you can kind of convert them here, keep you from grinding for too long to get those augments done. And then like these convert reusable parts, ancient dust, and veiled crystals. If you run low, you can just kind of like, you know, take some from another and fill up what you need. And I use these quite a bit. Like if I'm running low on veiled crystals, and I've got like a lot of reusable parts, I'll just, you know, convert a bunch of my reusable parts into veiled crystals. Very easy. And then obviously you have your augment ancient item. And this is where you actually take your ancients in and with your gems and all this stuff and actually put, you know, stats on them for the late game. But Kanai's Cube is really important for gearing. I would say probably wait until you get ancient items that have the right rolls on them, high enough rolls. They don't have to be like 100% correct, but you definitely don't want to waste too much material in augmenting or legendary gems in augmenting. You know, kind of, you know, it's kind of depending on like where you are in the gearing process. If you feel like you're not going to upgrade that slot for a while, or if that's as good as it's going to get for a while, go and throw an augment on it, even if it's like a level 50 augment. The other part of gearing would be your legendary gems here. Very, very important. Just like in this build, I'm using a Band of the Trapped and a Zystone, and then I have Boon of the Horde on just for like, you know, gold farming and stuff like that. But, you know, if you hit like a plateau with like your DPS and you're trying to push, you know, you want to make sure you're keeping your equipped legendary gems as high as possible, right? And I would say that, you know, if you're, let's say you're going to do like, you want to farm like GR100, yeah, you need to be getting your gems as close to like, you know, 95 or 100 as you possibly can. And I think that they should definitely take priority over a lot of other things, right? Usually when I start pushing to a new tier of Greater Rift, I actually try to get the gems leveled up as much as possible. You know, so say I'm going for tier 1 or GR100, I'm gonna want to farm that. Probably gonna run, you know, GR90s, GR95s a lot and get those gems as close to 1% as possible, because every time you complete a Greater Rift and you level up a gem, you know, the higher the gem level gets, if your GR level stays the same, the percentage of success goes down, right? So, you know, getting your gems leveled up kind of, you know, force pushes you up in the tier list for the Greater Rifts, and something to keep in mind. And most gems have 2 different abilities on them, and the second ability always becomes active when you reach level 25. So whenever I first get all my legendary gems for a build, the first priority is actually getting them all to 25, right? So you get the full benefit. And then, you know, I try to level them pretty evenly as I go up. Another thing I'll say about legendary gems too is I try to every season get a gem of ease to about, you know, 100 or so, and this allows me, if I want to like do alts or something like that, just, or if I want to power level somebody or something, having a, you know, around a level 100 gem of ease makes it a lot easier. Last thing I'll say about legendary gems are a lot of them are actually multiplicative or multipliers, and so don't skimp on them. Like leveling them up is what's going to help you when you're actually pushing high in GRs, and just having some utility as well. I'll probably level like a few gems of the same type, but like just for this build, I'll have my Bandit Trap, which usually never comes out, and then my Zystone, but I'll usually be flipping this Boon of the Hoarder out, and actually have a amulet somewhere that I flip out. This is running Squirch right now, but if I'm feeling it, I'll throw in a Band of Powerful or something in that nature. But that means I'm leveling technically 4 gems of 3, right? Because Boon of the Hoarder is not the important thing. It's not going to necessarily make progression better, but it's going to allow you to stay in gold. So if you're running to get like GR keys and you throw in a Boon of the Hoarder and you're just running normals, all that gold you're getting from that is going to help you empower all your greater rifts in the future. And since we're talking about Boon of the Hoarder, now you won't get that from GRs unless you've already run a vault. But what you can do is you can throw in a puzzle ring into the cube by itself and it'll open a vault. And the first time you run a vault in a season, you'll get Boon of the Hoarder. And then if you lose or consume a Boon of the Hoarder, if you run a GR, then you'll get another one from a GR. But you have to first unlock it through the vault. But talking about the vault a little bit more in detail, this is a good place to actually get a surge of mats, a surge of gold, and a surge of like legendaries for Forgotten Souls or whatever. You can sometimes have good RNG and get some really good like blue goblins. They'll drop a lot of items, or you can have horrible RNG and just get a bunch of like gilded goblins, and you already have a ton of gold and you make it even more gold. I'd say if you can pop a vault early when you're leveling, at least be leveled up to the point where you're getting like some of these gems here, these gem types. Gems are really important to get early on. I'd say probably around like 40 or 50, maybe even 60. When you get really close to 70, start running vaults if you have the puzzle rings, and that'll help you kind of like surge up and kind of cover that gap. Because once you hit 70, you gotta start putting a build together. If you already have the gems and stuff in place, then it makes things a little bit easier. Also, at the end of the vault, you'll fight Greed, and if you can control the fight, he'll actually just keep throwing treasure goblins off its back. So if you can control the damage you're doing to him, you can kind of like sit there and just farm him for just regular treasure goblins. Most of the time, I don't see this as being very beneficial, especially if you're specifically running vaults just to like full clear them. Usually I'll be running like GRs and I'll just kind of stockpile puzzle rings that you can see, and then like maybe once a week just like run through vaults as fast as possible. Get a lot of mats, get a lot of Forgotten Souls, get gems, get gold, and everything like that. But all those resources help in the gearing process, right? Because you're going to be using the, the cube and all these other things to, modify your items. And so those all require materials. Another thing is other than the vault is the cow level. If you throw this pole arm here into the cube, just like the ring, it'll open the cow level. It's a good source to get pools of reflection. So you can run a greater rift, leave it open, pop a cow level, go in there, grab, pool of reflection, come back out, close the greater rift, get an XP boost, go run another GR. There's usually about 2 or 3 pools of reflection in a cow level. So you can do like 3 GRs and then, before you close them, get a pool. It keeps you from running all over the map looking for pools of reflection. That's more along the lines of like Paragon farming. I'll talk a little bit more about Paragon in a minute. This is also a good place to get like some gold, and there's a lot of chests. And if you're running like Nemesis Bracers, you can get a lot of DBs because there's a few shrines in there as well. Just another tool in your tool belt for getting materials and just, getting some more drops that's not, doing like bounties or greater rifts. All right, next I'm going to talk about Kadala here. Kadala, you'll learn to hate her, but it's also a very integral part of the gearing process as well, because you will, when you complete GRs, get blood shards, and this is the only place you can use them in the whole game. So I usually stay away from jewelry for Kadala because they're just really expensive, and I usually try to stay away from weapons. I try to stick to the things that cost like 25. So if I'm hunting, like, let's say a ancient in a certain slot, let's say like ancient pants, I'll just go in here, and every time I get close to max on blood shards, I'll just sit here and just, get a bunch of pants from her, right? And even if you don't get, like, if it's like, weak and you're like not getting much like in terms of like ancients from her, what you have to realize is like on the backside is if you're spending all these blood shards on pants, you can only spend blood shards at Kadala, and then you go and like salvage everything. She is kind of like allowing you to get materials like veiled crystals and things like that. So it's basically taking one resource that you can only use at Kadala and turning it into a resource you can use to modify your gear, you know, in the future. So don't get disappointed if you don't, you know, if you've been trying for like ancients for a certain slot and you're not getting them, but you're still getting something in the back end that's useful, you know, and you have to use them anyway. There's nowhere else for it. Once you max out your blood shards, you know, you won't be able to pick any more up till you use them, right? I usually try like, you know, use blood shards after every GR, so I don't have to have that one moment where I have to stop and then, you know, go use blood shards, then salvage, then go back in, pick them up, you know, which slows everything down. All right, we're gonna talk about the mystic a little bit as far as gearing is concerned. Enchanting is really, really important. But like I said before, it's every time you roll an item, every time you roll a stat off of it, the gold cost is just gonna keep going up and up and up, right? There's been items, I don't know if there's any of these that she's wearing, but you'll see like this one only costs like 80,000 to roll because I pretty much got it pretty soon. And this one's like 300,000, but this one's like 4.5 million, right? So every time you try, you know, you can sit there and roll the same item forever, and eventually, you know, you'll be spending billions of gold every time you hit the replace property button. That's why it might be easier to actually go to the cube and reforge an extra legendary you have, you know, to try to get the stats you need, because gold, even though it is somewhat infinite, once you get to a certain level, you want to save that gold for empowering your rifts, because empowering rifts actually just gets more expensive as you go higher in tier, right? But just keep that in mind. If you're just sitting there rolling the same item like 50 to 100 times and you're wondering why you're just running, especially when you're leveling up, you're running out of gold super quick, it's because every time you hit that button, it just gets more and more expensive. Another thing too is you always want to make sure that your jewelry has a socket, right? If you don't have a socket, you can't use your legendary gems. So there will be times where you'll want a damage stat on like an amulet, but you'll have to replace it because having the legendary gem technically is better in damage if it's a multiplier. So, you know, I could have, you know, where this one, for instance, already has crit on it, but like I could, instead of a socket, I could probably have like, you know, fire damage. But, you know, if I had fire damage in a socket, I'm going to have actually less DPS as if I had a socket, no fire damage, and let's say a Bane of the Powerful or Bane of the Stricken in here, right? Because that's actually going to go into the multiplication or the multiplicative nature of my actual effective DPS. With all that being said, after a certain point, like this character has like, you know, 3.7 million DPS, which, you know, you should, at this level, you shouldn't be worried about that, right? That's going to go up slowly, but this is not a basis. When you're leveling up and like just putting together a build, this number is a little bit more important. But when you get really start getting geared and start stacking multipliers, it's all about your effective DPS, right? What I tell people is when you start getting to a point in gearing and you throw on a new item and you want to know if it's good or not, don't look at your sheet. Go into like a normal rift or greater rift that you've been running and see how it feels. Because if it's an upgrade, you'll be able to, you know, if it's a damage upgrade, you'll be able to know, you'll be able to feel if it's an upgrade, right? Just like if it's a survivability upgrade, you'll be able to notice that your life is not bouncing around so crazy, right? So effective DPS is king at this level. Make sure you just like go out and like try it out, you know. I personally ignore the sheet damage because it's almost irrelevant when you get to a certain point in the gearing process. All right, when it comes to like Paragon levels, right, I think like the most important thing that you should be worrying about, like your first short-term goal, is to be getting to 800 in a new season, right? You want to be able to get all these, you know, things filled up, and then from that point, everything you do in the game is going to give you experience, and you start dumping in a main stat. And even though your gear at a certain point might not change, you might not get any upgrades, every time you actually put on quite a bit of Paragon, it actually will give you some sort of progression, because it's just you know, you can get up to like 10,000 Paragon. So, you know, if you have like all ancient primals and you're at like 10,000 Paragon, you're gonna be running over everything. So it's very important not to get discouraged if you get to a point where gearing, you haven't got a new upgrade in a while. As long as you're stacking Paragon, you're getting better, right? It's just a little bit slower road to go down, right? And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is just like farming materials. Materials are super important, like I said, because you'll be using the cube, the mystic, and everything like that. And as you can see, like this is my non-season character. I've got like a crap ton of like materials. But probably now that you can get DBs, death breaths, in bounties, bounties are probably still going to be your most efficient way of getting materials, right? Because you can sit there, you can stockpile, you know, bounty caches sometimes in a season. I'll have a stash tab here. I'll just have a bunch of unopened bounty caches, because each bounty cache is going to have, like, you know, shards and all that other stuff in it. So if I don't feel like just opening them all right there, I'll just save bounty caches. You know, also if you just open a bunch of bounty caches, you're going to quickly fill up your blood shards. You have to go to Kadala, write them in there, and like use them to go pick up the other ones. So especially if you're gearing for another character, you know, or anything, or maybe you just have one day a week or whatever, a couple days a week that you want to just sit in town and like kind of mess with your gear, then those are the days to kind of open up a bunch of like stored, saved caches and everything like that. But you kind of get everything you need from bounties, with the exception of like greater rift keystones. But like, you know, if you normally, what I'll do is if I'm pushing leaderboard, one day I'll do just nothing but bounties. The next day I'll do nothing but normals, and then the third day I'll do greater rifts, either farming greater rifts for legendary levels, legendary gem levels, or for pushing, right? And I'll just do that on like a cycle, right? So after GR day, go back to bounties, and that always kind of keeps your materials, your gems, your greater rift keystones kind of all stocked up. If your build's actually using a Hellfire amulet, then I usually try to do the key wardens while I'm doing bounties anyway, just so that, you know, one day a week I can actually do Ubers as well. Maybe do Ubers like at the end of every like bounty game, and then when I reset I can do Ubers again. But that's only if your build actually using a Hellfire amulet that you have to keep making, because sometimes I've made like 50 to 100 plus Hellfire amulets to get the one that I need, especially if you want to try to get one that has the right passive and is ancient, so you can augment it and you can put a socket on it. It can get a little bit frustrating, but hope this video helped. Gearing is very I wouldn't say complex, but there's a lot of levels to it. There's a lot of there's a lot of like systems in the game you can use to kind of like modify gear and everything. But yeah, that's the basis of it, right? Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Peace out.